Fletcher, Chief Growth Officer at Cypress North. We're a digital agency in Buffalo, New York, and you're listening to the Agency Scoop. Each episode, I'll tackle a specific topic from an agency point of view. We're going to talk about what's helping us grow, challenges that we face, how we're working with our clients, and even things that bring us joy. Welcome to this month's episode of the Agency Scoop. And before I get into the main event, which is an interview with Donnie Broxson from Acento Agency, I wanted to talk a little bit about what's going on with us at Cypress North lately. So I started this podcast to talk about all things agency. My whole career is on the agency side. I've never been to what I like to call the dark side of client companies. But while some agencies are competitive with one another, I really love networking with other people that work at agencies and talking to them, finding out what works, what doesn't work, sharing with them what works, what doesn't work for us, and really learning from each other. And I think that having a community around agencies is really important. So we're going to continue to talk about specific topics each month, but I thought that it'd be great to do a segment before the main interview where we can talk about what's going on with us. And as you've always heard in my intro, we want to talk about things that are helping us grow, how we work with clients, our challenges, and things that bring us joy. So one of the challenges that we've been having lately is with hiring, and this is ongoing. We've been doing great through the pandemic. We've actually grown quite a bit and brought on a few more people. But one of the hard parts is finding the right talent and bringing them in-house. So talent is one of our greatest assets, and all of you listening, I hope you agree. But from an agency standpoint, talent is all we have. Our ideas, our work, what we do is all the result of our people. And so it's super important to us to make sure that we are hiring correctly, bringing in the right types of people and training them and really providing the best service to our clients. And so in hiring people to do digital marketing specifically, it's been really hard for us because there's not a lot of other agencies right here locally that do performance-based digital marketing. And there's a lot of amazing general full service agencies that do digital programmatic buying, or, maybe they have one person that does performance-based marketing, but we're really looking for talent in the area of someone that's Google Ad certified or has a really extensive expertise in HubSpot or other marketing platforms. And a lot of times we can't find anyone that has that experience or expertise that we're looking for. So with this challenge, how have we kept growing? Well, our marketing team, really, everyone that's been here even 5+ years, learned from our leader, Greg Finn, but they learned with having no experience whatsoever. We only have a couple people that came in with any kind of SEO or PPC experience. And by training people with no experience from that, that are either still in college or they've just graduated from college, we can really impart that training from a place of like ground zero. So what we found over the past year that we're hoping to continue to grow is our internship program. So we've been seeking out local college students in their junior or senior year and taking on a few interns every semester with the hope that if they do a great job and we like them and they like us, that they'll keep working for us. And we've actually hired 3 of our interns over the past few months. And every semester, we want to evolve this program, grow it. So we ask our interns for feedback so that we can continue to evolve the program, ask them what's working well, how are they learning, ask them for ways that we could serve them better, and ask our people for feedback, like how are our interns progressing, what else could we be doing better to teach them more, to get them to a certain point faster. And so that's really been working well for us. And I've been actually reaching out to all of our local colleges to try to gain some relationships with them to send us their best and brightest, which I'm hoping will turn out well. We'll see. I'll report back on that in a future episode. But that's one of the things that, we're having a challenge with. And one of the ways that we're trying to solve it is through, growing that internship program. So I'd love to hear from our listeners. You can find us on LinkedIn at The Agency Scoop. You can tweet at me at The Agency Scoop. But I'd love to hear how you are dealing with the pressures of hiring more talent in today's world where it's hard for every kind of business to hire talent. So I'd love to hear some of your ideas and how you're solving that challenge. So, on to the main event for today's episode. I had such a great time doing this interview with a dear friend of mine, Donnie Broxson from Acento Agency. Donnie brings 25 years of multicultural and international marketing expertise from both the agency side and the client side. He focuses on communication across all segments and channels. He's led efforts in a ton of different industries, including retail, energy, financial services, automotive, and healthcare in the US and Latin America. So in 2020, right before the world started to shut down, Donnie was named the CEO of Acento Advertising, which is a premier US cross-cultural communication shop with a 40-year history. He's done amazing things to keep this place going, keep growing, keep their culture alive, which you'll hear all about in our interview. Besides being this amazing CEO of Acento, he has been a friend of mine for over 15 years. Donnie and his husband Todd live in the LA area with their ever-growing menagerie of animals, and I love to talk to them about all things agency, get their advice. So Donnie and I talk about our ideas, our challenges, and he is one of my biggest confidants in this agency industry. So without further ado, here is my interview with Donnie Broxson of Acento Advertising. So, Donnie, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm so excited to have you as my first agency guest on the Agency Scoop. Why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your agency?
All right. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here with you, Jill. My name is Donnie Broxson. I'm the CEO of Acento Advertising out in Los Angeles. And we are a cross-cultural agency. We've been around coming up on 40 years now, with kind of born as a Spanish language Hispanic agency, but along with the community we were speaking to, we've evolved to expand into English and as well into a broader set of segments, as kind of recognizing that all the segments have an interplay and they all are living in the same communities. So we've kind of expanded or evolved our perspective to think more broadly than one segment, but with certainly deep roots in Hispanic is kind of where our hearts are.
And how long have you been with Acento?
Yeah, it's hard to say that without giving away my age, but I actually just celebrated my 10th anniversary at the agency.
Wow.
The agency tends to have very long tenures. So I've been with the agency for 10 years, coming in from the client side. And but about a year and a half ago, just in time for a global pandemic and all sorts of other crises, I stepped into the position of CEO. So
no time like the present.
We take what we can get.
Yeah. Well, a little background for our listeners. I've known Donnie for probably almost 15 years when he was on the client side before he went to Acento, and they were your agency, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Acento was the Hispanic agency for me on the client side. So
yeah, and they just couldn't get enough of you, so they brought you in.
Yeah, it's a funny story. I met with the then CEO of Acento for breakfast when I had decided to make a move, with no intention of going to the agency side at that point. And we got together for breakfast early one morning in West LA, and I said, okay, I'm ready to make a move. And I trust your perspective. What do you see out there? As I'm just starting to wander in. By the end of breakfast, he had convinced me to come to the agency, and so things come to you exactly at the moment when you're ready for them, whether you're looking for them or not. So
yeah, well, that's great, and I'm sure marketers make the best salespeople sometimes. So I'm sure he really is like, I know what I'm going to do with this breakfast. I'm going to get Donnie to come on board.
Yeah, he knew what he was doing. I had no idea what I'm doing. I probably still don't have any idea what I'm doing. So
No way. I have to say, I'm so glad. I mean, I met you so long ago when you were on the client side. We met at a conference years ago. And since you come over to the agency side, you've been one of my biggest confidants. I mean, we've kept in touch all of these years. And Donnie is the person that I always go to when I need advice or just want to bounce ideas off of. And, I hope
And
that I'm
vice
that person
versa.
for you.
You certainly are. You
So,
certainly are. I
well,
always think of you first.
Well, thank you. Thank you. So, when I wanted to interview some agencies for the agency scoop, of course, Donnie was my first thought. And I think that all of our listeners will really get a lot out of this because you just have such a wealth of information to share. So, and so
Thank you.
many of us, like born and bred agency people who have never been on the client side, you bring a little bit
Mhm.
of a different perspective there. So, I'm excited to hear
Wow.
that as well.
Well, I
Um,
appreciate the opportunity to speak with you and share a few things. And hopefully these gray hairs that we're seeing fill in and those since we first met have actually brought along some experience and wisdom along the way. Although don't count on it, but we'll see what we can pull out.
Okay,
All
we'll try. We'll try. We'll cut out all the bad parts.
right. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. You've got someone there ready to bleep me, right?
Yes, of
Okay.
course.
Someone's got the button. Okay. Perfect.
So I guess, in general, I forgot that you actually took the reins, right before the pandemic happened. But related to the pandemic or not necessarily related to the pandemic, what's your biggest challenge in managing an agency?
Yeah, I think the pandemic provided a lot of opportunities for us to learn and grow. That's the nicest way of saying to deal with the tough situation. But there are certain things that I think were heightened during that period. I mean, there are all the challenges of running any business, running a service business, running an agency, and then I would layer onto that running an agency that focuses on multicultural segments has some additional challenges of its own. But I think there's one thing that's really shared across any agency, any business, is that there's a rigor we apply to our work when we're doing something for a client. We have a process, we have a model that we're following. We go through the steps of developing insights and quality control, et cetera. It's often the case that we're the last ones that we ever put that attention on ourselves. And so, we're so busy doing it for others, we don't do it for ourselves. And so it's easy for your own agency, your own company's positioning to suffer, and for your own marketing efforts, and for to miss some of those points that under the rigorous microscope of the way you normally run your business for your clients, you would catch and you would take care of and you would develop and you would evolve. So I think for me, that was one of the first things I took on in coming into this position, was stepping back and saying, okay, we need to treat ourselves as a client and really look carefully at who we want to be. How do we want to grow? What's the objective we're running toward? And what's going to be the best way to master our resources toward that? Yeah, I grew up the son of a mechanic, and it was always the joke that my car was always broken down because ours were the last ones that we focused on, because that was the business. Anytime you spent working on a car, it was for the business to make money. It's kind of the same thing in agencies, and I think with any small business, but certainly in service related businesses, because you spend your time on billables, not on introspection.
Mhm. That makes a lot
So
of sense.
of
Throughout the
course,
sorry, go
go
ahead.
ahead. Yeah. Of course, through the pandemic, I think we were heading in the same direction.
Yeah.
Through the pandemic, there were a number of other things. I mean, we had to make really fast adjustments to a shifting situation, and at the same time try to provide a support to our clients who were going through similar situations, who needed to make quick shifts and pivots and change their communication strategy, revamp their media plan, uh, develop messages in real time. We work with a lot of healthcare clients, so you can imagine that every time the CDC shifted in bed, we were right there figuring out what it meant and what to say and what did consumers need to hear.
Mhm.
And doing all of that suddenly, instead of from our offices, from bedrooms and closets and all sorts of places all over the US. So Yeah, but I think one of the most wonderful things, if we can find the positive out of it, is that that was a shared experience across the globe, certainly in very similar terms across the industry.
Hmm.
And for an industry that's constantly looking for what is that universal insight to drive our messaging, to drive our campaign, when we look back, there's going to be something very universal about the generation that lived through this moment.
Yeah, it'll be so interesting. We'll have to do a reunion episode in 5 years and see how we'll feel then.
Exactly. Exactly. Who knows? We maybe have decided to go in very different career paths at that point after getting through this. So.
Well, I hope not. No, we'll see.
No, I'll still be right here in this chair.
So I guess, what things do you do at Acento that you feel are different than other agencies that you know? What are your
Uh,
specialties? I know cross-cultural makes you very different than a
mhm,
general agency, but
uh,
why do clients choose you over other ones?
yeah, I think yeah, and again, I think coming out of this period of introspection where we did take advantage of the past couple of years to think about who we are and what do we bring and what's unique. And I think that it's easy to say we take a holistic view where we have a special form of collaboration. We have the right tools, et cetera. And yes, we've honed those things and we've focused on those things. But I think the thing that Acento does really well is ask questions. And it's something I find when you're working with a segment other than the one that you personally belong to, the only way you can get deep into something is to ask questions. Well, my team here, the Acento family is incredibly diverse. I mean, it's primarily Hispanic, but we represent diversity across a number of other areas. And so a lot of the conversations we have about building a strategy is how do we go deeper? How do we ask another question to get to a more a more interesting aspect of this consumer's journey, of their motivations, of what stands in the way. And so I think that that's something that Acento does very, very well, is to humbly ask questions with no bias toward what the answer may be. To
Mhm.
let the consumer, let the audience, let culture guide us to the right place, rather than the um, it's easy to go in biased towards an answer and you're just trying to validate toward that. But I think that we very humbly take in information, and I think that's what's kind of separated us and allowed us to take a more than a Latino focused approach, but a culturally inclusive approach to our work.
Mhm. And it sounds like when you ask all of those questions and you have the right fit type of client is going to be someone that appreciates that and
Mhm.
also gives you the time to ask those questions to digest. And you're
Right.
you're probably like, no, everybody's hair is on fire, everything is due yesterday. But there's so many clients out there that we talk about. The right fit client isn't someone that just tells us what to do. It's somebody that
Right.
we can collaborate with and be a part of their team and help
Right.
drive the strategy and ask those questions and come up with those answers. So um, that philosophy and that core of who you are probably really drives who the right clients are for you.
It's so true, because I think that it's yes, it's a business relationship, but we spend so much of our personal time in business that finding that cultural fit between two organizations and between the people that make up those organizations is incredibly important.
Mhm.
We can't do things the way we do things if a client isn't interested in being a part of that. If we want to collaborate with them, there has to be some foundation on which we're building that relationship. And
Right.
I think that's when we're talking to clients, and of course, we're business. It's not like you can be super, super picky, but you can seek out the types of clients that are going to have an appreciation of diversity, that have that understand that it's more than just lip service and putting a couple of words in here, or or a certain complexion in there at the tactical level, but that there's something foundational and that we have to be willing to explore that and look for the authenticity that it can exist within that brand, within that client's product or service toward the audience that they're seeking to engage. And so
Mhm.
and I think we have to do that in a way that has open minds and open hearts, and it and so think finding that client that appreciates that wants to do that truly is it's magical when it happens. And yeah, I think I believe everyone wants to do the best, wants to do their best, wants to do what's right by their consumers. It's tough sometimes, and so you have to have a true dedication to it. It has to be something that's, I think, innate to who you are as a brand.
Yeah. Well, that's really interesting. One of my questions down the line was, how do you determine that they're a good fit that way, that perfect client? What kind of
Right.
questions do you ask in that new business process, and how do you figure out that could be it, that could be that magic?
Yeah, we try every time we're starting to work with a new client is the personal touch is important to us. So we've reached a point where if we ask clients when they send us an RFP to spend 30 minutes with us talking about it rather than just meet the date that they asked for their Q&A to be delivered, et cetera. And some will do it, some won't. If they won't, it tells me a little bit about what level of partnership they're looking for.
Mhm.
And of course, there's always the moments where, especially in a highly regulated space, they're not able to, and I understand that. But having even the conversation, I'm sorry, we're not able to because of this and this, but here's how we will make up for that down the road. But uh, we've actually recently, actually just yesterday, we walked away from an RFP after the Q&A because we found that they weren't open. They weren't answering any of the Q&A in any way that actually gave us an indication as to how to build a team for them, what proposal to put in front of them. And it, it's important to have communication. It's important to feel that our informational needs are validated just as theirs are. And so,
Mhm.
and to find that right fit. But then usually through those conversations, I have a friendly team of people, and we usually end up having a really great connection with whoever we're on the phone with.
Yeah. Well, I always say that you want to work with people you like. You want to like
Right.
working with the people that you're with, not just
Mhm.
like what they do for you or the money that they
Right.
give you. You want to like
Right.
that relationship. But congratulations, because I know that is really hard. And
It is
once
very
you've even
hard.
invested in that Q&A process, like even to get to that
Yeah.
point where you're like, nah, I know we've already invested a few hours, a few meetings in this. We've talked about
Right.
this. We've started doing research and we need to walk away. It's so hard from a new
Right.
business
It
perspective
is.
to do that. So great job.
It is hard. I yesterday, more of us, we were all in the office, and I called a couple of my executive team in. I said, okay, here's how I want to respond to this. I just want to make sure we're all on board because it's the big decision to walk away. Because
Mhm.
there's always the what if, but I think it's the right. You have to be. Yeah, it may be a luxury at times, especially during a global crisis, but you have to be firm in who you are and where you're heading. And don't let things pull you away from that direction.
Definitely. Well, and one of the things I was going to ask about was retaining your best talent, because
Mhm.
um like we talk about it a lot here. If we take in a client that's going to run everyone into the ground, that people don't like working with, that the work isn't
Right.
great, that you just don't want to, nobody wants to work on that client, you're going to lose some of your best
Hmm.
people. And in a market like Buffalo, we don't have as big of a market. So you think about, like, I think about where you are in Los Angeles, and it's like, wow, you must have talent everywhere. Like you could just find somebody, right? But then also you probably have the challenge of there's a lot more agencies and there's a lot of
Hmm.
other corporations probably trying to poach your
Yeah.
best people. So, how do you make sure to retain your best talent? What are some things that your agency does to just keep people engaged and loving life
Yeah.
at Acento?
Yeah, we're fortunate. that we actually just recently recalculated our tenure, and right now we have an average of a little over 7 years
Wow.
tenure across our team. um, I think that we have a natural tendency to stay because we do our work in a pretty specific way, and there's a camaraderie among the team that people come to work here because they want to work with the other people that are here, and that's a fortunate balance that we find ourselves in. Maintaining that over the long term is, of course, a challenge, but we've established a certain set of values that go beyond the work, but they go to the human side of how we share a space and how we operate together, how we demonstrate respect to each other and respect the inputs from each of the uh, expertise areas around the agency. And I think the rest, with that foundation, the rest comes quite naturally. This is a team that wants to be together. And when we had to go into lockdown last year, and we had actually, this space I'm sitting in, we took possession of this space the day lockdown started. So we walked in, dropped our boxes, and then went home for months and months and months. And I think one of the hardest things for my group was, it wasn't the familiarity of an office or the having the resources around you. It was the human connection with these people who were such a part of their lives. We're a very diverse group, and the diversity just comes so naturally, and it's so appreciated that this kind of becomes a little bubble where we can talk openly and straightforwardly about the things that are happening in the world. When Black Lives Matter movement was really coming to a head last year under just incredibly difficult circumstances around the country, this team came together and we held moments of silence by Zoom because we couldn't think of anyone else we wanted to share this incredibly difficult and emotional moment with. And so our team came together, and at different moments, putting out a manifesto on AAPI hate was something that came organically. It's been this past year has provided amazing opportunities for introspection and growth, and this team was looked to each other to go through that together. And so I think I'm fortunate in that way, that keeping my talent is I have a little bit of a step up because they want to be together,
Mm-hmm.
but they have to have growth, and everyone needs to be growing. And this past year is also, during those moments of introspection, people have looked and said, what do I want with my life? If I've had someone who wants to live in the woods in Oregon, well, we've encouraged that, and someone does now and
Wow.
does their work from there. And we've embraced what people need to grow, and we look for ways to accommodate that here. And we also accept sometimes, your next step in your personal journey isn't going to happen here. And we then have a huge send off for someone where we're wishing them the best. And we have a lot of boomerangs who come right back after they go out and get that experience. We've welcomed 2 or 3 people back in the last 6 months. And so I think we're fortunate to have that culture that makes us feel good about being here. And that's something that wasn't created overnight. That's many years in the making.
And that's awesome. I mean, that's really, in our business, the only thing we have are people. It doesn't matter if you have a fancy
Exactly.
office or amazing
Right.
furniture or super expensive computers. I don't know. Like, it's the
Yeah.
people that make it, and you
Right.
can't do anything without them. So when
Exactly.
when you hear about these other agency cultures that like churn and burn people, or people
Right.
are working,
Yeah.
overnight and they never have time to have a life and they hate it, and
Yeah.
but they have to stay, like, it's like so disheartening when you hear about other agencies
Yeah.
like that. So that's awesome.
There's some great life lessons to be learned in those environments. But they're ones where you can figure out a better way to do things, and a way
Mhm.
to have a more civilized approach to your work-life balance, or or to at least feel good about it when you're doing it.
Exactly.
I
So
think that does, how you feel about the work you're doing imbues the work with heart that may not exist there otherwise. And that's important to have that.
exactly. Oh, I love it. I need to come visit Acento.
Yes,
You
please
know, I'm a
do.
Buffalo girl. I'm never moving to the West Coast, but I need to
I've
visit you
tried.
guys and come see you.
I've tried to get you to move here, but
Just can't, Don. Can't.
with
Not
Zoom, I know we can we can invite each other into our offices and our homes
exactly.
without getting on a plane.
Exactly. Oh my gosh. Well, so I guess going back to, working with clients, it's so awesome to hear about all of your people and managing people, but, going back to working with clients, and finding those right clients, how does your background of working client side, affect how you view your clients or how they view you? And I guess
Yeah.
I want to say I asked that because I have had over the years many clients who will say, "Oh, I understand. I used to be on the agency side." And they'll say, "I know what you're doing right now." And then they'll be like some of the worst clients you've ever had because they're like, "I know I can make you do anything. I know you'll
Exactly.
just say yes." So that, some of the clients that have been on the agency side and then go client side, sorry if anybody's listening that's done that, but like I'm not saying all, but there's been a few doozies
Right.
in my day. So how do you feel about going from client side to agency side and how that's all shook out?
It's funny. I've bounced back and forth a couple of times in my career, and I didn't realize just what all of the things that are attached to that, at least in perception wise, until I'd been here a while. And they're like, "Wow, nobody goes from client to agency. You go the other direction. You must be crazy." And crazy aside, I'll accept that. But it's it's interesting because I think it does affect the way, I mean, I had gone from agency to the client. So I was carrying that perspective with me on the client side. And there were things to be gained from that. There were things I knew from agency that helped the client be more productive and be a better client to their agencies. I think at a point, my role was managing relationships with about 8 agencies at most of those years I was there. Um, and that teaches you something about how to get the best from them and make them feel, create a safe space for agencies to do good work. I took that very seriously on the client side. I didn't realize that that was uncommon until I came to the agency side and saw that that's really not a common activity on the client side, to create the safe space that makes your partner agencies non-competitive with each other. You know, my
Mhm.
approach is, and I had this approach on the client side, and I try to remember this now that I'm on the agency side, is we don't need that. This doesn't need to be a competitive relationship when agencies are working together. There's always plenty of work to go around. And
Mhm.
if we find a way to do it that's respectful of each other, with being focused on what the outcome is to help this our client improve their bottom line or move public opinion. I mean, it depends on our type of client. And even looking beyond that to the impact we can have on consumers' lives, on the audience that we're reaching. Especially, we're fortunate to have some clients that are truly doing good in the world. And so we're able to look beyond the client's objective to the lives we're impacting in the territories that we're serving. And so I think that one of the best things I learned on the client side is that if I created a safe space for my agencies to think and share and riff off of each other, I got better outcomes. And they were all treated fairly. They all got paid. And I try to
Mhm.
bring that to the conversations with my partner agencies, when we're working on something, is let's just get the best thing out. Who cares where the idea came from? You know, our expertise is Hispanic. We know how to activate a Latino. You know how to activate whatever community you're responsible for, or through the channel that you're taking a lead on. Let's put that together and come out with something bigger.
Yeah.
And so, hey, also, life's too short to be so competitive and worried about everything somebody else is doing. And
100%.
certainly this past year or so should have taught us that.
Well, that's awesome. I mean, what do you, when you're kicking off a new client relationship and you're brought
Mhm,
in as the Hispanic agency, and maybe
mhm,
there's four other agencies working on this
right.
business, um, it sounds like because from your experience, you have experience doing this and creating that space, and not all
Mhm,
agencies play well in the sandbox.
right.
And so, how do you kind of take the lead to be like, let's work together? How do you kick that relationship off on the right foot?
Yeah, I think we try to not be threatening in our conversation. I mean, it's that we're here to to provide a certain perspective, and we want to do our best work, but we want to do it in a way that your best work and my best work
Go together.
turns into something more, that one and one equals three, you know.
Mhm.
And if there are four or five agencies, my God, what can we add up to together? Uh, yeah, it's hard to get that. I mean, a lot of times people, another agency is not going to trust your motivation in in bringing that perspective to the table. We're kind of trained from a young age in this industry to be very circumspect
Mhm.
of potential competition. And of course, the moment we say we're cross-cultural and that we do more than Hispanic and that we do speak English and we reach into that audience, that's immediately seen as a threat to a total market agency or a general market agency. And it's
Mhm.
not intended to be. It's intended to be the best, the way to get to the best work, get to the best perspective for our client. Uh, to recognize there are certainly places where we intersect, where our segments intersect, where culture and language intersects. Those are magical, beautiful places in the work that we get to do. There are just as many spaces where there's a diversion in the room, where there's something unique that you we can't sacrifice the unique that makes something truly impactful for me and makes me associate to it for the sake of the intersection or the universal. We have
Mhm.
to find the balance between the two. And you can't do that alone. You have to have the broader perspective and you have to value broader perspective.
Yeah.
Put it all out on the table and then find find where that truly moving thing is in the midst of it and then find the right way to bring that to life for each of your segments that you need to reach. Uh, And sometimes it rolls about up together and sometimes it rolls quite far apart to make it work the best way. And just being open to where that's going to lead us.
Um, that's really wise. um,
There's my gray
and
hairs coming out.
I guess so. Well, and I think it's funny because in recent years, I see that a lot more in RFPs, and what people are
Hmm.
looking for in an agency is, how
Yeah,
well can you work with, you're not going to be our only vendor,
right.
um, how well do you work with other people? What's your experience? Because it's very telling when you get an RFP that says that, because you realize, oh, they've had this not work out, like, or
Yeah, they've
they've
had
had
some
agencies
problems.
that didn't, they butted heads. But
Yeah.
it's funny because when we first met, is you were doing that. You had these agencies all in specific niches, and they were all coming together to work for you as the client. And you had what we fondly called the Dontourage.
Oh my
I was
God,
not
that's
one
right. I
of those
forgot.
agencies.
I
I
know.
I didn't work for one of those agencies. I just knew you through the conference, but Donnie had come to this conference, and you had, five or six agencies people with you, and
Right.
they all knew each other, and they all had so much fun. And they were like, oh, I'm in the Dontourage. I'm with Donnie. I'm Donnie's Hispanic agency. I'm Donnie's Asian agency. I'm Donnie's
Right.
digital agency. And
Yeah,
we had the best time. It was such a fun conference, and we had so much fun,
it
but
was.
they all truly got along, knew each other
Yeah.
well, and seemed really like they worked well together. So
Yeah. That was a good
kudos to
group.
you.
It's a good group of agencies. We had a fun time. I think we actually did a panel at that conference, putting them all up there and say, "How do you work together?" And I think one of the common, by the point that we were there, they'd been working together for a while, and there was trust, and and it was a very productive group dynamic playing out. But they all said during that panel, that when he put us all at the same table, and we all kept our mouths shut because nobody wants to give away something to this other agency there.
Hmm.
And it took a while for people to realize that that's a safe space, and that uh, you having something didn't mean it took anything away from someone else. And so, but yeah, it had worked out really well. And that was nice. I'd forgotten the Dontourage term. I never knew where that came from, but it was funny.
Yeah, I
So,
don't know who coined it, but it was great. And it perfectly described that crew, the
that's
Dontourage.
great. How funny. Yeah.
So I guess, one of the things that we talk about here too with pitching new business and other agencies is it seems like a lot of clients have opinions on size. So
Hmm.
how big is your agency and what do you hear based on that? Are you too small? You're too big? What challenges do people see with your size?
It's it's interesting. We're right now pretty slim, about 30 people,
Okay.
full time here in L, and well, not just in LA, but between here and Chicago, about 30 full time people, and then I would say another 10 that are contract freelancers that are close to full time, and then of course the broader bench. And it's interesting, there are times where I have, and sometimes it's in the course of one day. You have a new business meeting in the morning, a new business meeting in the afternoon, and you come out of the first one feeling, kind of chest beating because they're like, well, I don't know if you guys will work with us because you guys are so big. And then we go into a meeting later in the day with McDonald's that are like, I don't think you're big enough to handle our work, and which is very discouraging. I think that finding the right balance and finding the connection to the right size client. I mean, it's nice when you work with a smaller client who feels like you're big and have great inputs, and you get a little bit of a hero complex. I think in those initial meetings that dies off fast, uh, but it is tough to hear from a large client, from a national client, um, and that they feel like you don't have the resources to scale fast, and that's usually the challenge. We've had big national clients throughout our history, and but it's still scary for a big client to put their faith in a smaller organization. And so the challenge becomes, okay, how are we set up to be able to service this level of client? And of course, in some areas where media planning and buying, there are specific challenges if you don't have to be able to move that much money through an organization into
Mhm.
media channels. There are some requirements of resources. Uh, Almost always, we're kind of at that tip to the next level size right now, where we know how to handle that, we know how to get in there, but it's hard to create that trust, even with a client who wants to give you the business. And we've had that where
Mhm.
a sizable client said, "Look, we love what you've presented. We love your model, but we worry about this. We need a company that can scale up to $100 million buy in the next 3 to 4 weeks." That's a big ask for a major multinational. It's a tremendous ask for a small company. So yeah, I mean, it's frustrating when you reach those moments where it's a type work you can do and you can do well, and
Mhm.
and you want to, but the stars just aren't quite aligned yet.
Yeah. And it creates that other problem of, okay, you need to fill a gap when you need new
Hmm.
business, right? Like in the
Right.
pandemic, people go on pause and different things happen,
Yeah.
and you're like, I need to win new business. And then you
Right.
win a piece of business that you're like, okay, now we have that problem of how do we do this, and how do you
Yeah.
get there? And so it's hard, getting to that next level or getting that big
Hmm.
client, and being able to
Right.
scale up.
Yeah. Scaling is I think one of the biggest challenges. I don't know if you guys are experiencing this in Buffalo, but yeah, the the labor market, the talent market, labor is not the right word. I don't know why that came out. The talent market is really tight right now. There's a lot of competition. There are fewer people in the space. Work's being divided out in very different ways.
Mhm.
There's competition for, you made the point earlier that here in LA, we have a lot of different agencies. There should be a huge talent pool. There is, but now with Zoom, I have to compete with Miami for my talent,
Mhm.
and Chicago and Dallas and New York. Uh, and with it, I have a team of highly trained multicultural segment specialists that are in great demand right now. So scaling is tough. And this year, 2020, I prefer not to look back on. It was a really tough year for the agency, not just, of course, the world as well. But I was worried about the agency. And 2021 on has been the pendulum swing, and we've actually had brought on 10 new clients to our roster
Wow.
just in the last 4 months. And so the all the work we had done, because scalability was one of our primary goals in the beginning in January. We set that as we have to grow. So we need to make sure we put in all the work on scalability before the growth hits. And
Mhm.
so these past 4 months have been really challenging, that we put those points in place, but then the talent market got so tight that it's really tough to get people in the door.
Yeah.
Fortunately, we have release valves in the form of, we had a really strong contractor bench and freelance bench of people who wanted to come into the organization. Our culture, that culture work that happened before, meant that the moment we started growing and talent who had gone on to other experiences called up and said, "Hey, things are kind of looking interesting over there. I always intended to come back. Is now the opportunity." And so that's helped as well, because someone coming back who knows how things operate with you, knows who everyone is, can step in and be productive on day one. So, but yeah, it's a challenge. And then of course, all the technology that makes our work move more smoothly is shifting constantly.
Yeah. Wow. Well, it sounds like you were getting prepared for it, but you're experiencing the same things we are with hiring, as it seems like
Yeah,
everybody is. And that is definitely one of our biggest challenges is finding the right kind of people. So anybody
right.
listening, that
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Here's an open call. Can we just put my phone number across the bottom of the screen?
send us your resumes,
Yeah,
Donnie and Jill at gmail.com. Uh,
exactly.
we'll divide amongst
We'll
ourselves.
share them. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Um, so I guess, what do you see, to wrap it up with a couple other things, what do you see impacting your business the most in the next few years? Positive or negative, I guess. What trends are you seeing that you're excited about, not so excited about? For
Um,
the reunion episode, we're going to bring this back and see if your
right.
predictions come true.
Well, one thing I've learned, I think we've all learned in the last year, is you can only predict so far. Um, there are so many things that are far beyond our control that will totally rock everything. And so I think that the biggest trend that we can embrace and utilize to our advantage is that of flexibility and agility. I think we've all learned we had to do that. I was listening to a podcast the other day. Now that I'm starting to commute again, I'm catching up on the podcast that saved onto my phone from last year, and I tuned into one that was recorded 2 weeks after lockdown started.
Wow.
And so these guys were suddenly recording from their homes and trying to find quiet places, and there was such a somber tone to it. And callers were coming in and saying that, we can only handle this for another week or two. Thank God it'll be over soon, and we can go back to our regular lives. And I'm listening to this, 16 months on, and realizing just how hard of a transition this was for us in March 2020, but how we've we we learned something about ourselves along the way. We we flexed, we pivoted, we found new ways to get things done, and I think that allowed us to keep going. And that somber tone, the depression that set in on us last March, we found ways to cope with and to move forward. And so I think that of all the trends, and we can look at technology, there's amazing things in media, there's amazing things. Um, I think that anything that supports our own ability to pivot at a moment's notice are the things that are going to drive us. And that's not just as businesses, consumers are looking for that as well. They want homes that are equipped to be able to handle a broader piece of their life than what it was originally intended. And so I think that we're going to see a lot of things over the next 5 years that are reactive to this, but proactive toward an unknown in the future. And we're going to be preparing for something. And so I think that harnessing that is really an important aspect. For my business here, in terms of being a multicultural agency or cross-cultural agency, I think one of the biggest challenges for us is there are moments in history where the conversation around diversity, inclusion, and equity rise to the top. We toss it around a lot, and everyone makes some commitments, and then 2 years later, we're like, wait, where did all that go? Where did all that investment that corporate America said they were going to make into the African American, the Asian, the Latino, the LGBTQ consumer, where did all those board positions for women professionals go? Did we deliver on what everybody said in the moment? I think that that's going to be a big challenge, is actually holding ourselves as a society and as a business world accountable to the emotional commitments that were made over the past year or so. And as a cross-cultural agency, fighting off everyone who crowds that space over the coming year. I think a lot of people want to feel that they can take care of the multicultural consumer, the in language or in culture work, by adding something on. And I think that misses something, a deeper resonance that can be achieved and that community deserves. And so I think, it's just, I was saying, when it comes tying it back to the talent and the scalability, our biggest challenge often is we have to compete now with big multinational general market agencies who want our talent, to be able to start tapping into that. And so it's a great thing for, as a recognition for the work that they've done, but at the same time, it makes keeping this going and growing this a little bit tougher.
Yeah. Well, I guess so. The last question I have to kind of wrap it up for anybody that is, if somebody's new in marketing and advertising, they're just starting out, maybe they've just interned at their first agency job. What advice would you give them, looking back on all these years of experience? Would you tell them to run?
Yeah, I think run fast. I think that we work in such an exciting industry, where you get to apply your intellectual side as well as your creative side, bring those things together and come out with something that's powerful and beautiful and can impact culture for years to come. That's the most beautiful aspect of our work. But I think the advice I would give, I think that attracts people, but we don't get to have that big, beautiful moment every single day. It doesn't mean that it's not coming. So I think that the stick-to-itiveness for someone young coming in and the willingness to put aside maybe the instant gratification of something to learn something more deeply, to have a greater impact in the long term, is I think one of the toughest things to imbue in people coming into the industry. And so I think that each one of them has to remind themselves, why did I come in? Is that still there? Is it still achievable? And what do I need to learn to get there? And to be constantly purposefully guiding yourself toward that next step.
And we're not as fancy and sexy as you see on TV.
I know. Yeah,
The agency
exactly.
business, but it is a lot of fun if you stick with it. So
But yeah, it's funny. I tell the team, when we go to the client, you know, especially clients who haven't worked with a lot of agencies, when they think of bringing the agency in, there's a lot of cultural baggage that goes with that, and the best thing we can do is to help them feel they want a team showing up to work with them that's smart, fun, and sexy, and makes them feel smart, fun, and sexy. And
Mhm.
that's a lot of pressure on an agency to show up. I think even more after we've been working from home in t-shirts with shorts on.
Right?
Uh, but it's still a wonderful industry, and we get these little moments occasionally where we can really do something magical for society, and that we all get to feel good about. And I think that's what keeps us here, makes us come in the next day, is that those little sparks, those little moments where what we do can truly be meaningful.
Yeah. Well, that was inspiring. I'm glad I kept that to the end. It's the last question. But well, thank you so much,
Glad I got
Donnie.
something out.
Oh my
It's
gosh,
so great to see you, Jill.
this whole
Always
interview
a
was
pleasure.
amazing. I so appreciate you doing this, and I know that our listeners are going to love all these nuggets of wisdom that you gave out. So thank you
Thank you
so
very much.
much.
All right, take care.
All
Good luck,
right.
everyone. Bye-bye.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of the Agency Scoop. If you liked what you heard, you can subscribe so you don't miss a show. You can also find us on the Cypress North YouTube channel or follow the Agency Scoop on Twitter and LinkedIn. I'd love to hear your ideas for future topics. See you next time on the Agency Scoop.